We're in Simon Kuf Teslach Aleph. Talk about Yavesh B'yavesh. So the general rule is, in general, for Isurim, if you have Isser and Heter mixed together, the way the decision is based on Roiv. If there's more Heter or more Isser, that's what it is. That's a typical for regular Isurim. But in food-related Isurim, there's an extra rule. That is that if the Isser is nice and tam to the Heter, then it's Asr also. So Bitul B'rov is not good enough. So you need Bitul B'shishim when there won't be any more taste anymore. Okay, if there's at some point, it becomes so little Isser that it doesn't have any taste anymore. So that's a food-related rule. We talked about it a million times already, so that's not for today. Today we're not going to talk about that. Today we're going to talk about situations when Bitul B'rov is good enough even for a food-related Isser. Okay, so the first type, which we're not going to talk about really, is that there are some things where the nature of the Isser is such that Chazal only answered the food itself. They didn't answer the tam of that food. Okay, they only answered the food itself. And therefore, it goes with the regular rules. If it's Bitul B'rov, it's going to be mutter. So the examples of that are pasakam and bishalakam and kitnias and food that are also because of marasayin. So in all those kind of foods, it's the type of Isser that it is that Chazal only answered the thing itself. Well, in kitnias, it's a minute. It's only also the thing itself. Excuse me. It's not also the tam of that thing. There's machlokes in about whether chametz of Pesach maybe also should be in that category. Maybe Bitul B'rov and kvinas hakam. Those are two other things that are possibly included in that they're batul, that they have Bitul B'rov. And there's two other examples that are not because of the Isser per se is nice tam of gam, and when Isser falls into a non-food item, also it's Bitul B'rov. Okay, that's again not today's real discussion. The most common case where something is Bitul B'rov, a food-related Isser is Bitul B'rov, is in the cases when it's min b'minoi instead of min b'sheini minoi, and if it's Yavesh B'yavesh. Okay, that's what we're going to talk about. So we said once in the past that min b'minoi for these kind of rules depends on tam. Okay, that makes sense. Which is, if it's min b'minoi, it means it's the same thing. Let's say it's apples and apples. Okay, well maybe that's not good. You would think of that of wine and wine or whatever, something, two things, meat and meat. So it's the same taste. So it's not going to be nice and tam. You're not going to taste the Isser and the Heter because they taste exactly the same. So it's not going to be nice and tam. So who needs Bitul B'shishim then? So Bitul B'rov is good enough. Okay, and Yavesh B'yavesh, it's also the same idea. What's Yavesh B'yavesh? Excuse me. is a taruvis, but they're not mixed together. What it means is we have three pieces of meat, two of them are kosher, one of them is treif, and we just don't know which one is which. So the taruvis, it's Yavesh B'yavesh, the taruvis, we don't know which is which. It's a taruvis. But it's not nice and tam. The heter doesn't taste like Isser. There's no tam to it. They're all sitting on the table. So that's an example of Yavesh B'yavesh, and it would be Bitul B'rov. As opposed to, let's say, if we mixed, my case before, wine into wine, treif wine into kosher wine, then the wines are all mixed together. Okay, or the wine into water, it's all mixed together. Then the heter has the taste of Isser. That would be, then we need Bitul B'shishim. Okay, another example I want to give you of Yavesh B'yavesh is if you have wheat kernels. So wheat kernels are not chametzik. The kernels themselves are they're called berries. The wheat berries are not chametz themselves. But what happens if some of them got wet and they started to become chametz? They began to grow in a way that you can't tell. You can't always see those kind of things from the outside. So you know that if in this big box, some of them are chametz and some of them are not. But you have no idea which one is which because they all look the same. Okay, it can become chametz without being noticeable. So you can't tell which one is which.
Without being noticeable, without the cracks, is that vada or suffix chametz?
That's a good question. It's probably suffix chametz because we can't tell which is which. That's a good point. But the point is, it could be chametz, and I just can't tell which one is which. Okay, so I don't know which one is which. So it's Yavesh B'yavesh because all the pieces are the kernels are all distinct from each other. You could tell one from the other. You just have no idea which one is the heter, which one is the Isser. It's not like you can't tell which is. It's not like they're mixed together. So that would be Yavesh B'yavesh. Okay, what happens now if I take those kernels of wheat and I grind them up and I turn them into flour? So then most places can assume that kemach b'kemach, when we turn into flour, that's considered. You can't tell one piece from the other. You can't pull apart one piece of flour from the next piece of flour. You put one kernel of wheat from the other, but flour, most places can assume Kemach b'kemach is considered lach b'lach. At that point, they're all mixed together, and then we would need bitul b'shishim. Okay, and we'll get back to Pesach soon. Okay, we'll get back to Pesach related things soon. Okay, so as I just said to you, logically, either one of those things, either being Yavesh B'yavesh or being min b'minoi, is reason to not need bitul b'shishim. In both of those cases, there's no tam spreading from one to the other. If there's no tam, so then nothing. Follow the regular rules of Dinei HaTorah that things are about the B'rov. We don't have to need bitul b'shishim because there's no time if it's min b'minoi. There's no time if it's Yavesh B'yavesh. That's logically what it should be. That's the din deraisa. But midrabanan, both of those are aser. Min b'minoi needs shishim, and Yavesh B'yavesh needs shishim. Why? Because Chazal were concerned if we'd allow Yavesh B'yavesh. Okay, in my case, I had 3 pieces of meat. The 3 pieces, is not an example because that's min b'minoi. Okay, but if I had 3 pieces of meat that were Yavesh B'yavesh, Chazal were concerned, then maybe you will cook it. If you cook them together, it'll become lach. Because tam is lach. Remember, the difference between yavish and lach has to do with is there tam or is there not tam. So tam would spread. So maybe you're going to cook them together, and then there'd be a problem of it will be lach b'lach. And what happens if you just had min b'minoi? Chazal, if you let min b'minoi, you might end up allowing min b'she'eni minoi also. Okay, so therefore, if you have either one of those things, if it's just min b'minoi or it's just yavish, both of those need bitul b'shishim midrabanan. Okay, but the only time you're allowed to be samech, you're allowed to bitul b'rov is you have both together. If it's min b'minoi and Yavesh B'yavesh, then you're allowed to do it. Then it's mutter, and that's because there, even if something went wrong, it would still be mutter midiraisa. If you'd have to do 2 things wrong, so I forgot who says Prima Gam says that's considered gzera. Okay, that would be a gzera to say maybe you'll go both things. So maybe if you'll do min b'minoi, you'll do min b'she'eni minoi. Maybe you'll cook it together. Like that's too many steps apart. So that's mutter. Okay, now there's an interesting just for logically to understand what's going on over here. There's even though the din is by min b'minoi that's yavish v'yavish, you're allowed to eat it. It's mutter. Bitul B'rov is mutter. So in my case of 3 pieces of meat, there's 3 pieces of meat here. It's one is treif and 2 are kosher. It's min b'minoi and it's yavish v'yavish. They're mutter. But the din is you're not supposed to eat all 3 of them together. Okay, you're not supposed to eat all 3 of them together. Okay, what's the reason why you're not supposed to eat all 3 of them together? So the Shach says the reason is because it doesn't look good. Okay, it looks like you're eating isser because come on, I mean between the three of them, one of them is for sure isser, so you can't eat them all together. Okay, now you could have said it differently. This is Prima Gam makes a subtle reading here of the Shach here. You could have said it differently. You could have said is min b'minoi is only mutter because we're assuming that I have the heter. Okay, but if I eat more than half of them, then I know I have the isser. I should assume I have the isser. Okay, in which case, so Prima Gam says that's not correct. He says, for example, if I have these 3 pieces, I'm allowed to eat 2 of them. Even though if I eat 2 of them, the chances are that the isser is in the 2, in the rov, not in the meat. I'm allowed to eat 2 if I want to, and then I can eat the 3rd one later. I just can't eat all 3 of them together. Okay, maybe those 2. So
in other words, there really shouldn't be any isser.
There's totally be allowed to eat it.
And over there, it's not just rov, it's vadai.
Right.
Vadai getting this, but you're saying it's the sapach.
Correct. Well, he doesn't use those words, but we could say something like that. Yes, but it just looks bad. Okay, it looks like you're doing something wrong. So that's why you're not allowed to do it. But Be'etzem you'd be allowed to do it. And I'm saying this is like Kainchi says. He says you're even allowed to eat 2 of them at once. You're not allowed to eat all 3 of them, but you're allowed to eat 2 of them. 2 of them you're allowed to eat. Okay. So that's the basic rule for min b'min yavish v'yavish. If it's midaraisa, it's mutter if you even have one of them. But bitul b'rov if you even have one of them, either min b'min or yavish v'yavish. Midrabanan, you have to have both of them together. It has to be min b'min and yavish v'yavish in order to be mutter. Okay. So now let's move back to Pesach. Midaraisa, chametz is bata b'shishim just like any other isser. No difference between one and the other. Midrabanan, chametz gets mixed into food on Pesach, it's aser b'mashehu. Okay, so the Rosh says this that chametz is aser b'mashehu is only in cases where the rule would be usually Bitul B'shishim. So there's an amount that it could be so little that it's diluted. He says, but by Pesach, it's even the rules are way different, even a mashu of it. So instead of being this amount would be batal, even if there's mamash a tiny amount, it's not batal. Okay, even if there's almost nothing, it would be batal. So the Rosh says, but that has nothing to do with cases where it's Bitul B'rov. He says if it's Bitul B'rov, it means it's a whole different set of rules. It's not a food-related, regular Bitul B'shishim kind of rules. So if it's Bitul B'rov, he says, if we have a situation where it's Bitul B'rov, meaning Yavesh B'yavesh and Min B'mina, he says, then it's mutter. Even on Pesach, there's no Isser Mashal. That's what the Rosh says. And the Rif says, he says, no, he says, you got it completely backwards. He says, the Rif said, he lived before the Rosh, but he says to the Rosh Hashita, he says exactly the opposite. He says, the only time we could talk about, the only time we say that Min B'mina and Yavesh B'yavesh could be Bitul B'rov is in cases when we say we don't have to. It only in cases where we don't think about Tam at all. So we totally ignore the fact that there might be Tam. So then, like Yavesh Min B'mina, they keep saying that again and again. Then we could say something could be Bitul B'rov. But we have something which is Asur B'mashahu, means is Chazal told you don't think about Tam. It's Asur even without Tam. We don't care whether there's Nois and Tam or not, because B'mashahu it's not Nois and Tam. We don't care anything about the scene as Tam. So it makes a difference what it is. It's Yavesh Lach B'lach, it makes a difference. And no matter what, it's good Asur B'mashahu, even in those cases. Okay, and that's how we paskin, like the Rif, that this Mashahu applies even by case of Yavesh B'yavesh and Min B'mina. Okay, so that means in the case that I told you beforehand, if I have the wheat kernels, some of them are chametzik and some of them are not chametzik. It's Min B'mina and Yavesh B'yavesh. So I told you beforehand that it's going to be Bitul B'rov. He says, but if that happens on Pesach, it's not going to be true. If it happens on Pesach, then we're going to say that it's also b'mashahu. So if even one kernel of that stuff would have been chametz in a zillion kernels of heter of regular wheat, it would be also b'mashahu. Okay, that's what happens on Pesach. What happens if it happens before Pesach? Didn't happen on Pesach. So before Pesach, there's no Isser Mashahu. Not only that, even on Erev Pesach, there's no Isser Mashahu. Until Pesach itself, there's no Isser Mashahu. So you might say, you would think is, your first assumption is, okay, so that right? Even if the Chatzos, there's no Isser Mashahu. Yeah, there are those who hold that it's considered Davashesh Matirim, that's why it's Asur Mashu, but no, we don't pass like that. Not Asur Mashu unless it's Pesach. Okay, on Pesach it's a Mashu.
Don't they say that the prepare before Chatzos, you try cooking before Chatzos, some hidden cooking before Chatzos, and then it's bottle.
Because there are some sheets that say it's Davashesh Matirim. Okay, anyhow, so the 16 tough mem sign halcha base. Okay. Look at it. Maybe I'm wrong. That's here in the bottom of my page here. Okay, but the thing is, so that's what you say is okay. But so if it happened on Pesach, we have a problem. If it happens before Pesach, it should be okay. The only thing is, there's one other piece of information here, and that is there's a special din that Yavesh B'yavesh, even though if it was bought before Pesach, it's chayzer v'nir. Even though Isser Mashu only applies on Pesach, Isser Mashu doesn't apply before Pesach, but there's an exception. If something was Yavesh B'yavesh was mixed together before Pesach, when it comes back to being Pesach, it's Asur. So you're allowed to eat it on Erev Pesach after Chatzos, then you're allowed to eat it. But come Pesach, it's chayzer v'nir and it becomes Asur again. So that means is that my whole hefter just went out the window, because then it's true Yavesh B'yavesh even for chametz before Pesach is mutter. Well, it doesn't really help you. It helps you for a couple of hours, right? Until 11 o'clock on Erev Pesach in the morning, you could eat it anyhow because you're allowed to eat chametz. Until the rest of the day, it's okay. You got this heter, but the whole Pesach you're not allowed to eat it. Okay, so at first glance you would say, not my second glance already, because I already told you the first glance it was mutter. Second is that it should be usher because of chayzer v'nir, which is so it's the truth. It is. So it's not such a big. It doesn't allow us to be so much. But I have two cases where this din is going to be negated to us. Okay, two situations where this din is going to be relevant to us, that Yavesh B'yavesh could be mutter if it happened before Pesach. Okay, one is there's this whole idea that the chametz is not going to be batal is a din d'Rabbanan. It's because of Isser Mashu, which is that's a d'Rabbanan. So the Magen Avraham says, well, there's a rule that when you have an Isser d'Rabbanan and something happens that makes it's possible that there's no Isser here anymore, then you're allowed to be Mekel. Called Toilin B'drabanan. We're allowed to assume that something happened. So he says, what would happen if some of the wheat kernels got destroyed? Okay, they fell in the garbage. Okay, or someone ate them. Something happened to some of the wheat kernels. So enough that could have been the Isser. So let's say there were 5 chametzik ones fell into there, and 10 of them fell out of the pile now. So it's possible that those are the ones that fell out. Not very likely, but it's possible. So if you're talking about only something that's only Asim B'drabanan, Toilim B'drabanan, you could be Toilim that what happened was that the Isser fell out and the Heter stayed behind. So over here, this is all, we're talking about a Drabanan over here. We're talking about Issa Mashu and the Issa Drabanan of Chayes Veneer and the Issa Drabanan of that even Lach Balach needs all those things are all Drabanan. So this is Toilim B'drabanan. So if you want to, you can assume that what got destroyed was the Chametz and the Heter stayed behind. Okay, it's a special din for Drabanans. So that's an example where had this happened before, if it happened on Pesach, it would be Asa B'mashu, too bad. But if it happened before Pesach, to be choishish that then it should be choishish veneer. If we had lost some of it beforehand, it would be Toilim B'drabanan, it would stay mutter.
So Toilim doesn't work on Pesach?
I don't think so, because at that point, if it fell in on Pesach, the whole thing would have been Asur. So I don't think at that point, if some fell, I might be wrong, I don't think that at that point it would help. But if it happened before Pesach, and now some fell out
when?
Before Pesach.
Also before Pesach.
I think that's the case. He said, I might be wrong. I think that was the case that he says. Then we say Toilim B'drabanan, we assume that what fell out was the Isser, and what's left behind the Heter, even though it's very unlikely. I mean, come on, what's the chances that what fell out was Isser?
Obviously, you're not allowed to take some out with that intention, right?
Am I allowed to take it out and then force a Toilim B'drabanan? If I take it, I don't think so.
Is that
probably not?
Otherwise, that then would everybody do that.
Would that be aim of
to take some out? Maybe, but it's not Bitul because I'm getting rid of the Isser. Yeah? Okay, I'm not sure. Okay, but now there's another case where Bitul B'rov comes in. My second example with this din is negated is like this. Comes from a din actually here in Siman Kuftes. The Mechaber is not talking about chametz. He says, I have a thing which is Yavesh B'yavesh. Okay, let's say my case is pieces of meat. Okay, I have 3 pieces of meat here over here. Okay, and what I want to do is, and I'm allowed to eat them because it's min b'min and Yavesh B'yavesh. But I want to cook them together. Now, if I cook them, we're going to have a problem because if I cook them, then the time is going to spread. It's going to be lach balach. So I'm stuck here because as soon as I cook the meat, I'm going to have a problem. So the Shulchan Aruch says, what you could do is like this: you could throw in another 50, however many pieces of meat into the pile. Now the tray form will be batal b'shishim, and then you can cook them because if you cook them, it'll be batal b'shishim. Okay, no problem. First, add a lot more heter, and then there'll be so much heter that there'll be 60 times as much heter as iser. And now you'll be able to cook them, and you'll cook them together, and it'll be batal b'shishim. Shach says, what happened to bitul l'chatchila? Doesn't that sound really awful, right? You're piling in the heter in order to then find a way to then cook it afterwards. So he says, no, it's not bitul l'chatchila, because right now there's no iser. Right now these 3 pieces are mutter. It's min b'min Yavesh B'yavesh. I'm allowed to eat these 3 pieces. I'm allowed to eat them, just that I can't cook them. Okay, so bitul, you only not bitul iser. Right now it's heter. So right now I can put in as much as I want to. Then with having in mind that in 5 minutes from now I'm going to cook them, and when I cook them, then it'll theoretically would have been a problem. But I avoided the problem by putting in so much heter on top of it. Okay.
Isn't there an asik if you're allowed to bivatel basar or chalov to bivatel with the other one?
So there it's because I have in mind to make iser. That's why there's a shaila about it. Yes, there's a question about that. But here I'm not. Right now what I have is heter. That's what here what I have is heter. And in 5 minutes from now I'm also going to have heter. I'm never going to have iser. Over there also. So I'm taking
right now it's heter, and if it's bottle, I want to have iser. Right.
Okay, I'm not sure about that either. Fair question. I'm not sure. Okay, so the same thing over here happens also with the wheat. So the guy has wheat, and some of it is chametzik, and it fell into the other wheat. He doesn't know which one it is. Now, what's going to happen is if he wants to make matzah before Pesach, he's no problem. He grinds it up before Pesach, it'll be bottle, and he'll be allowed to use it. But what if he wants to use this wheat, it's going to be chayzer v'nir on Pesach. So what he's allowed to do is he could add so much more Pesach wheat into the mix. Into this thing, add so much more into it, at which point even the chametz would have been batal b'shishim if it was there, and then there's nothing about this chayzer v'nir. Okay, so the same example, same like the Mechaber said. Okay, but one more thing, and that's like this. All the cases that I told you so far were cases where the iser and the heter were very distinct, very clear. The one piece, there was treif meat and there was kosher meat, or there was chametz grains and there was pesach grains. Okay, those were very clear. What happens if they were very clear they were min b'minai. What happens is if I have treif meat, but it's not treif because it was nevela, not treif because they forgot to shecht it. I bought it from Costco. It's treif because no one did malicha to the piece of meat. So the meat per se is kosher, but the blood that's in there is not kosher. Okay, is that considered min? And it's now that meat is with other meat. Is that min b'minai or not min b'minai? Again, I have 10 pieces of meat. I kashered most of them, but one of them I didn't kasher. So is that min b'minai or not min b'minai? Meaning because it's meat and meat, it's meat and meat. But the isser is not meat. The isser of that one is blood.
Is it isser until before the blood comes out and goes back in?
Is it isser?
An unsalted piece of meat is not usser in and of itself.
Okay, very interesting. Okay, that's true. If it was a raw piece of meat, if it's a cooked piece of meat, then it would be usser, yes. So we'll have to say our situation, my cases will be it's a cooked piece of meat. You're right, if it's a raw piece of meat, then technically you're allowed to just bite into it, yes. But we're talking about a cooked piece of meat. So the Mechaber sounds like he thinks that it's a case of min b'minai. That's what it sounds like he's saying. And the Shach says it doesn't make any sense. It's not min b'minai. It's meat and blood. Meat and blood is not min b'minai. He says the issue of that thing is not the meat. The meat part of it per se is what's similar between that and that. The min b'minai is heter. What's not good is the blood. Okay, and so
if you're gonna cook it, right?
Somebody's
gonna cook it. It's gonna be awesome. And it was the gzeira is, go after the reader. Zilbos time. The reason is I might cook it together.
Mm-hmm.
So when it's min b'minai, so that won't result in a problem. But now, if you'll cook it together, it'll be a problem
because the blood will give time to the meat. So
right.
It's min b'she'ein mina. Okay, you're saying the same thing. It's min b'she'ein mina. Now most Achronim accept the Shach, and they try to explain why the Mechaber really means that. Okay, or the Mechaber was being special maker for that case because it was a special chumrah to ask all kinds of reasons why the Mechaber might have been why he might have said that. He didn't mean it. He only meant it in a very specific case. A bunch of sorts of Achronim for that. Okay, but most people assume like the Shach that that's considered min b'she'ein mina. Okay, so, that's not so relevant to most people. Most people don't think about kashering meat. I mean, maybe it happens in a shlachta by mistake. They didn't kasher a piece of meat. Okay, it could happen, but it's very negated to a very real case for us. And there's like this. Let's say you want to go to a treif restaurant or a rest stop or whatever it is, and you want to get, or for that matter, you go to the supermarket and get sliced lemons. Okay, so the din is they cut the lemon. It could be that the lemon is treif, because depending on how they use the knife, we talked about this at one point. The lemon could be treif, but the end of the day is even if it's true that the lemon is treif. Let's say the lemon is treif, but we say is how many pieces could be treif? Let's say there were 10 slices, so 2 of them have treif on them. How many could be treif already? So the ones that are treif are Bitul B'rov, and the ones that are not treif. Okay, that the end of the story is, the first half of the story is, maybe they're not treif. That's one part of the story. But the second half of the story is, even if they're treif, only so many of them could be treif. How much shamnunus could be on the edge of the knife? So only some of them could be treif. So some of them are treif, most of them are not treif, so it's min b'mina, Yavesh B'yavesh, and it's mutter, you're allowed to eat them. Okay, you're allowed to consider them to be kosher. Well, wait a second, I just told you that the Shach says that no, that's min b'she'ein mina. Because the lemon is not treif, the cut pineapple is not treif in the store. It's the shamnunis from the knife that's treif. So it's what's on.
Blios, right? You pick the lemon,
the Blios or the shamnunis, whatever you want to call it. Whatever it is that came from the knife is what's going to make it treif. What came from the knife is not a lemon. What came from the knife was something that's a meat. I don't know, whatever you think came off that knife or was below from the knife. Okay, so why do we allow it? Because of min b'minai. It's not min b'minai. It's not lemons in lemons. Lemons are kosher. It's lemon. It's meat in lemons. Okay, so this shach I just told you about blood in a piece of meat should be the same thing over here also. Okay, and for that matter, the same question should be about DE food that's labeled as DE. Okay, so we've talked about that also at times. Whether food that's labeled as DE, is it really milchugs or is it not milchugs? I'm not talking about if you make it in your house. I'm talking about commercially produced food. So there's all kinds of reasons why it might be mutter. But one of the parts of that question is, okay, let's say some of the cookies that they made in this factory are really milchiks. Let's accept for whatever all those things are wrong, and some of them are in fact considered milchiks. Okay, some of them are milchiks. But most of them are not milchiks. There's only that much blia in the equipment. Right? The machines are only so big. They don't make one cookie at a time. They make a zillion cookies. So there's only so many. Let's say 100 of cookies have the blia that are treif, and 10,000 cookies are heter. Well, 10,000 would be b'shishim. Okay, hundreds of them are heter. So they're Bitul B'rov. You see, wait a second.
How's there blia when it comes to cookies?
Because the cookies were baked on the same factory. They cooked the cookies. Par of cookies. Par of ingredients. And yesterday they made milk cookies. So how much? But the blia that's in there is not cookies. The blia that's in there is milk. So milk in cookies is not min b'minoi. So why would we allowing this? We're saying it's Bitul B'rov. Again, the same question. The Shach said that
Who said we don't? Maybe we don't.
So the question is that correct? It's an assumption. So you're saying, okay, yeah, David, you're right. Go ahead, I'm leaving. I'm out of here. Okay. So the assumption is that one at the end of that story always is, well, it's min b'minoi Yavesh B'yavesh. I'm saying the Shach seems to say not like that. Okay, that's a question. So Rav Shachta said no. It's really correct what people are saying. It's really correct. It is min b'minoi. It's considered min b'minoi, even though the Shach says not. Even the Shach. Let me say that nicer. Even the Shach would agree in our cases that it should be min b'minoi. Okay. So first he said one reason that you may not be as happy with, and the second reason, which is more, mainstream. The first reason is he says in din we're assuming that there's tam in the cookies or in the lemon and things like that. He says, but in practice we know there's not going to be any tam. He says so in min b'minoi has to do with lamaisa. In practice, all the cookies are going to taste exactly the same, and all the lemons are going to taste exactly the same. So for min b'minoi, lamaisa is we know that these lemons are going to taste just like the other lemons. So maybe it was affected in some minor way. There's some little bit of nesinas tam to that. Not enough to change it from min b'minoi to ein mina. To be min b'minoi, you don't have to be an exact copy. It doesn't have to be exactly the same taste. It has to be roughly the same taste. So basically, that's what you can end up with. You can end up with roughly the same taste. The little bit of change, which and in parentheses say basically the no change that we're going to notice, but even the little bit that might be there is not enough to change it to min b'she'ein mina. Okay, as opposed to the case of the blood. Blood is very different than this. Okay, that's one answer. That's a little more
radical.
Okay, but his second reason is like this. He says just like Yossi said before, and he says zilbasa taima. He says, what's the reason why? If it's min b'she'ein mina, if it would be min b'she'ein mina, it would not be Bitul B'rov. Remember, I told you if it's Yavesh B'yavesh, midaraisa, it should be Bitul B'rov. It should be because there's no nesinas tam. One doesn't give tam into the other one. So why, if it's Yavesh B'yavesh, did Chazal say you can't use it? Chazal said it needs Bitul B'rov. Why did they say that? And the reason is because they were afraid you might cook them together. If you cook them together, it'll turn into lach balach, and this will be the tam into that one. That's what they were concerned about. Don't eat it, even though it's Yavesh B'yavesh, because you might end up cooking it. So he says that idea that you might end up cooking them together, that's only true when I have 3 pieces of meat or I have a bunch of kernels of something or whatever it is like that. I might cook them together. He says when we're talking about you made cut lots of lemons or you made hundreds of cookies together. That's not realistic. No one's going to cook them together. That's not going to happen yet. What do you say? Almost as bad as first. Okay. So if it makes you feel better, the Tefillah Tzaddik on that shach says like that also. In a case like that also, and Minchas Yaakov also says such an idea that when the possibility of them being cooked together is just far fetched. Okay, that the possibility that they should be cooked together. That doesn't mean it's not radical. Anyhow, you could just. Yeah, it's some Achronim saying. Okay, I have some names here if you want. I have some marmukans over here of people who say like that. So he said that's why people assume that it's considered min b'minoi, even though he says even the Shach would agree that it's min b'minoi, even though you based on the Shach you might have thought not like that. Okay, and yeah, there are other cases that we've talked about in the past. I'm not going to bore you with that, and not even to tell you what they are. But